And so, you know, you don't want to open this all the way, so you only have to turn it like a turn or two. I don't know, there's a turn, sure, why not. Alright, let's get this torch lit up. Alright, so now we're looking through some shade 5s, and we were getting ready to light this fine torch, and we're going to be doing a little bit of cutting with it. Now, this is a process that I'll cover more in my, you know, how-to oxyacetylene cutting video I made a while back, but basically, I'll just open up this acetylene valve a little bit, and we'll get our fuel gas going. Then I'll awkwardly grab for my striker. And as you can see, that's a nice dirty acetylene flame. Now I'll just add some oxygen to it. Hang on, I gotta open this one first. Alright, now I'll just add some oxygen to it. And it smooths out, and all that crap goes away. Now as you can see, we've got a small cone of flames, which could be a little bit sharper, so I'll press the cutting oxygen, strike it out here, adjust it, and hey, that's about how it's supposed to look. Great, now let's cut this for unsuspecting piece of steel. Alright, now I'm just going to use the preheat flames to heat this up. Wow, I rarely cut anything with a torch anymore, and I can feel the heat radiating off of this here fine plate. But it's only 1/4 inch, and we're using the right size tips that should preheat pretty quickly. Basically, as soon as the edge of it starts glowing, well, then it's ready to cut. And if I just take this torch away, it's glowing, so it's ready. I'll just hit the old cutting oxygen, and we'll be off to the races. That's all there is to it. Let's do another one. I like it. Now about the shutdown procedure. I'll be honest, it isn't rocket surgery. Pretty much all I'll do is I'll come here to this red hose, which is our fuel gas hose, and close it. And the oxygen, which is still going, blows out the flame. Now I'll shut off our cutting oxygen up here. Yeah, it's really not the worst thing in the world. Pretty much all I'll do is I'll close off this acetylene cylinder, and I'll close off the oxygen cylinder. Then I'll just go ahead and bleed the gases out of the torch and out of the lines. Loosen up the T-screws so there's no pressure on the regulator. And we're done. And this is our finished cut. As you can see, there's a surprisingly small amount of dross on this plate. But yeah, that's oxyacetylene cutting and all of its awesomeness.
A few moments later.
And so you're going to want something more in shade 5s for it. Some people get away with the shade 5s. I recommend something darker, and so I'll be using the same helmet, except I have it at shade 9, which is its lowest welding shade. So that's what we're going to be running. Also, the sheer quantity of compressed air this uses is going to be a little bit noisy, so I recommend some hearing protection. Then you got gloves, and again, because it's an electric arc, I'll be wearing a long sleeve shirt for this. Normally, I believe a minimum of a shade 8 is generally what's recommended for plasma cutting. So alright, I guess we'll just make a couple cuts on this thing. I'll just reach around back. As you can see, I already have the air hooked up. That's about all the setup there is, and I'll just flip the switch, wait for this thing to come to life, and it's pretty much ready to go. So let's do it. So I got all my gear on except for my gloves, and I'll just go ahead and take the ground clamp it right here to our table. I'll put the gloves on, and we'll be in business. Now, as I mentioned before, using a plasma cutter is actually surprisingly straightforward. Pretty much all I'm going to do is flip up the yellow safety and pull the red trigger, and that's all there is to it. So, let's make some cuts on this plate. Very fast and very clean. so this metal is going to be much more cool to the touch than something cut with a torch. In fact, I can get all the way up to here before it starts getting hot. Although plasma arc is much hotter than an oxyacetylene flame, because it's much more concentrated and you move a lot quicker, you actually put a lot less heat into the material. And there's our finished plasma cut. As you can see, the beginning's a little messed up, but that's my fault. You know, I just slipped with the torch. But aside from that, I mean, it is clean, it is smooth. There's virtually no post-cut cleanup required. I mean, we have that tiny little layer of slag on top and just a tiny bit on the bottom. And you know, you take that and you compare it to our torch cut over here, which, you know, keep in mind, I don't use a torch every day, to be honest, but I consider my torch cutting skills to be, you know, at least as good as the next guys. I've been formally educated in how to use a cutting torch by two very good schools. You know, I used to scrap metal by the truckload, slicing it all up with a torch, and that's about par for the course. You know, like I said, you know, I'm probably not the best in the world at it, but I've had some experience. You know, I've cut plenty of stuff with a torch, and that's just that's about an average cut. This, on the other hand, you pretty much just set it on the piece of material and drag it along. Now, another thing that I'll talk about right now is drag cutting. Now, as you can see, we've got the nozzle on this torch. As you can see, it's recessed a little bit into that shield. And what this allows me to do is just set the torch on the piece of material, like I'm not holding it up or anything, and just drag it along. As you saw, that's actually what I was doing. This makes for very smooth, easy cuts. And as you can see, you know, that upper ledge is about 1/8 of an inch, which makes this torch perfect for straight edge cutting with, you know, a piece of material that's 1/8 inch thick. This is my straight edge of choice, YouTube. This is just a 2-inch piece of angle that's 1/8 inch thick, and you know, for the heck of it, let's try some straight edge cutting. As you can see, all I've done is I've vice gripped our straight edge to the workpiece, and here we go. And there's the results. You know, if you thought freehand cutting with a plasma cutter was nice, straight edge cutting is about 10 times more fun. And I guess the only thing above this would be CNC cutting, but unfortunately I'm not exactly set up to do that here. But as you can see, you know, I've not attempted to clean this or anything. That is all the slag that's left behind. It's very clean, it's very fast, and it's very simple. Now, you know, to be fair, you can get really good cuts with a plasma cutter just freehanding it, especially if you've had a little bit of practice. But this is better than you can get freehand, and it's also like 10 times faster, because instead of just creeping along with the torch and going along at a very slow pace trying to get everything just as perfect as you possibly can, you just put it down, just like that. And it even sounds remotely like that, I think. I guess. I don't know. I was wearing earplugs. But regardless, that's freehand cut, or yeah, that's freehand cutting. That's straight edge cutting with a plasma cutter. Now, another thing to keep in mind is that this plasma cutter uses what's referred to as, I believe, drag cutting. I think that's what they call it. And as you can see, the nozzle is recessed slightly back into that drag shield there, which keeps it off the plate, so you can just set it on the plate and drag it along. And this is mainly a hypertherm technology. It's a technology they invented and patented, albeit I believe the patents have expired. But regardless, that's mainly a hypertherm thing. Now, we have talked about the advantages and disadvantages of each cutting process, and so we're going to put them head-to-head against each other in a couple of real-world welding shop fabrication type tasks. First off is going to be cutting expanded metal. Now, the plasma cutter, our new school technology, has a little trick up its sleeve, and it is what's referred to as the expanded metal mesh cutting mode. Something like that, I think. Anyway, I'll just flip the switch up and we're now in that mode. Now, there's two types of arcs that a plasma cutter, a modern plasma cutter, produces. A plasma cutter like this, and they don't all do that, but the hypertherms disengage the pilot arc the moment the regular cutting arc is engaged. But when you put it up into expanded metal mode, the pilot arc stays engaged. So that way, instead of starting the pilot arc, cutting this, and then having the arc go out, the pilot arc automatically re-engages. So pilot arc, cutting arc, pilot arc, cutting arc, pilot arc, cutting arc, pilot arc, cutting arc, all the way across here. It's really fast and it's really effortless. Let's try that out, and then we'll do it with the torch. Now let's try cutting some stacked materials. We got some 1/4 inch on some 1/4 inch, both of which have a light coating of surface rust. And underneath, there's just a random piece of diamond thread that I found. And we're gonna try to cut through all of these at once. Well, there you go. Alright, let's try that with the torch. Well, so there's what the plasma cutter did, and here's what the torch kinda did. That was not an enjoyable experience whatsoever. I actually stopped because the torch started popping real bad, and I saw nothing positive coming from going forward. But basically, what happens is with the plasma cutter, because all 3 of these plates are grounded, it just shoots straight through all of them and moves forward. But with the torch, you have to preheat it, and you can only access the top plate, so that's the only one you preheat. And then you kind of cut that, and the slag comes up, it shoots back to the side, it comes straight up. It's a big mess, goes everywhere. And then the disastrous bubbling nightmare, which is that, preheats the plate below it, so then when you get all the molten slag out of here, then you can do the same with the plate below that and move forward. And I don't recommend it at all, because when you try to torch cut stacked material, you decapitate your tripod. Don't decapitate your tripod. Use a plasma cutter or some other cutting method on stacked material. Next up, cutting aluminum. Alright, this is just a piece that I actually practiced some spool gun cutting on. Or, yeah, that's exactly what I did. Spool gun welding. Practice using a spool gun on aluminum on this here very piece of aluminum. And since my tripod is now done, I'm just going to have to freehand this. So, yeah. Back to the good old days when I first started making YouTube videos. Yeehaw. Well, dang, look at that. Not exactly the cleanest cut ever. That one's probably going to take some grinding or whatnot before I'd want to weld it. But, hey, we just sailed straight through it. Next up, torch cutting aluminum. Alright, now this is going to be interesting because, you know, with steel you preheat till it starts glowing orange, and then you hit the old oxygen lever, and you're in business. But unfortunately, aluminum, being that it's a non-ferrous material, doesn't really glow like that. So this is going to take a while. Giving it a while to preheat, YouTube. I'd say you could preheat 3/16 to 1/4 inch steel in this amount of time. It's a little bit awkward because I'm doing it one-handed. I just go buy another tripod, but the nearest place to do that's about an hour from here. I want to get this video wrapped up for y'all. So I'm freehanding this one too. But hey, at least now I can see what the camera's filming. Yep, so we're pretty much just going to have to sit here and wait on this thing to do something or probably do nothing. Yeah, we could have preheated this 3 or 4 times over by now. Yeah, this is not going to happen. Yeah, this is pointless. Very low safety hazard. I mean, like I said, you'd pretty much have to come over here and put this up to your hand or something and pull the trigger to injure yourself with a plasma cutter. I mean, I'm sure there are plasma cutter injuries that are accidental, but you almost have to try. You really do. Cutting torch, cheap to put together. This one cost me about $500. Well, not this one. Elements of it. I actually traded my torch to Wes, and like this actual torch was mine, and this regulator, I think that hose, that Smith regulator, that's not mine. I think the cylinder's mine. I think he got that elsewhere. That's bigger than one I had. But whatever the case, I put that together for about $500. Put together, expensive to run, requires gases, which you have to go buy. They're pretty expensive, at least the acetylene is. The oxygen's not that bad. But, you know, slightly higher amount of training required to use this properly. Still not all that bad, but, you know, definitely more than plug it in and pull the trigger. But at the same time, you know, this is very portable. If you're going to be working out in the field somewhere, slicing up farm equipment, you know, might want to consider a cutting torch. But other than that, plasma cutter.